Welcome everybody to today's masterclass on crisis communications. Today we're calling this one Co-ops Under Attack. And today's masterclass is sponsored by situationhub.com, which is a crisis communications application specifically designed for electric cooperatives. I always like to give a timestamp on the program in case our beliefs change as we go forward in life. Today is February 11th, 2021. And ugly weather is moving in, and ugly weather is actually what led up to today's program featuring Mark Stubbs, who is the CEO of Farmers Electric in Texas. And we're going to talk to Mark in just a minute and hear his story of how high bills led to outrage on Facebook, a Facebook group starting up, and all the attacks that his co-op went through. Mark has been CEO at Farmers in Texas since 2004. In 2001, he was CEO at Cotton. In 94, he was CEO at Fort Belknap. And in 1990, he was at Bluebonnet getting his feet wet after working for a city prior to that. For those of you who have not met me, my name is Jared Bro, and my business is Bro Communications, which is a crisis communications firm. My background is 1979 to 1994. I was a journalist, so I was the one who covered when things went wrong for you. And in 1994, I got tired of TV and left and started my own business as a consultant and a trainer and a speaker and an author. And last year, right about a year ago, we launched Situation Hub, which is an automation process for crisis communications. And if you want to know more, you can go to situationhub.com and take the 30-second or the 90-second tour. Our objective here is not to do a sales pitch for Situation Hub. Our objective is to get here once a month and share best practices with you, and to try to bring in some higher level thinking and really establish a community of learning. So anytime you want to see this masterclass or any of the other masterclasses, go to situationhub.com/blog, and the previous 4 master classes are there, and that's where we're going to have a community. We don't care if you're a subscriber. We don't care if you've ever worked with Bro Communications. What we care about is that you're with a co-op and that you're in a leadership role, and that communications is important to you, and that you want best practices. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today is managing expectations. As we're talking today, February 11th, 2021, we've got winter weather moving across the area, and a lot of the people on this call right now are actually one eye on the call, one eye on the control center, and watching what's going on in their own systems. And one of the things I always encourage you to do at times like this is to manage the expectations of your members and all of those stakeholders. Communicate before the event, communicate during the event, communicate after the event, and make sure you communicate empathy throughout the entire process. But communicating before something goes wrong is a big part of what we're going to talk about today, because Mark at his co-op wasn't necessarily able to communicate before the particular crisis that we're going to examine today. But now, in the 5-6 years since then, managing expectations and communicating in advance is a key part of what they do. Anytime we talk about crisis communications, I want you to remember it's like umbrellas and fire extinguishers. You don't buy an umbrella because you hope it rains today. You buy an umbrella in case it rains. You don't buy fire extinguishers because you hope there is a fire. You buy fire extinguishers in the event that you have it. So crisis communications is really about being prepared like a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout and being ready at all times. When we talk about crisis communications, my simple definition is any situation that has the ability to negatively affect your revenue, reputation, and brand of your organization has the ability to get to the point of being a crisis. And lastly, we have 5 steps to effective crisis communications that, as we talk with Mark today, we might reference some of these 5. So I want to share them with you, which is always do vulnerability assessments. I've been saying traditionally do them once a quarter. I'm now saying spend at least 15 minutes once a month, because while we're in the middle of COVID, the nature of a crisis is often twice as complicated because it's COVID plus winter storm, COVID plus tornado, whatever it happens to be. So vulnerability assessments are number one, writing a crisis communications plan, number two, having a library of pre-written news releases, number three, training your spokespeople through media training and doing crisis drills. Both media training and crisis drills are designed to be places where you can mess up privately, so you don't have to mess up in public. And I always encourage folks not to make this harder than it needs to be. You can sprint through these steps. They're very hard. I've already done the work for most of you. So if you need help with it, the crisis communications plan and pre-written statements are all now automated in Situation Hub. I was rewriting plans for a bunch of you yesterday, and what used to be 4 sections of a plan is now reduced to 4 sentences. So those of you who have my traditional plans, my traditional news releases, probably within the next week, you're going to get a much shorter and much more efficient crisis communications plan. But I believe you should never waste a good crisis, and that's why we have Mark on today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I believe that every crisis presents an opportunity for us to learn. And with that, let me give Mark a little bit of a setup. Mark, you said it was 6 years ago. It was about this time of year. You had just come out of heavy winter weather, and that's why it's so timely today, because we have heavy winter weather, which means electric consumption and usage is going to go up, which means somewhere between 30 and 60 days from now, depending on where all of you have your billing cycles, that means you're going to probably have some really angry people who aren't necessarily ready for their bill to be higher than it was last month when it may have been milder weather. And Mark's situation is a group of members got together on Facebook and just started trashing the daylights out of Farmers Electric and really attacking the cooperative. And it was spreading like wildfire pretty quickly. So with that set up, Mark, why don't we let you tell the rest of the story and a little bit about how you began to manage the situation.
Okay. Before I do that, I want to just give a shout out to my neighbor, Jerry Williams. Hey, Jerry, hope everything's going well. Saw him hop on. Also got Jim Nemo, Farmers Electric's manager of communications, on here, and he put together most of these slides for a statewide communicators get together in 2015, I think later 2015, after things had settled down. I really don't need any slides to recall this. It's very vivid. This was sort of a game changer type event that transpired really 6 years ago, as Jared said, when we'd had some bad winter weather. I'm going to share my screen, and so we had this winter weather come through, and before then, 2 things happened in December, which were an important part of the story. One, we had increased our PCRF, a 1/4%, 2.5 mils, which, I didn't think was that bad. I mean, that's what, utilities do. That's what co-ops do. We lower the PCRF. Well, as you know, members love it when it goes down. Sometimes they're not so happy when it goes up. It just so happened that we raised it before we had a serious winter event. The other thing that happened in the end of 2014 is I met Jared Broke. Jared had spoken to a statewide managers group in December, so it was fresh on my mind as we got into this, crisis, but I'll get further along. So we had these high bill complaints coming in, and it started with 1 or 2 people chirping on a Facebook. At the time, I was not a Facebook member. I really had resisted. I just didn't see the need for it and didn't really want to do it, so I didn't. And so we had a couple of people chirping on Facebook, and I don't know, Jim, within 2 weeks, he every once, every other day or every 3 or 4 days, I'd go in his office and say, how many people we got on the Fight FEC page now? Well, it went from 2 to a dozen to, one day his mark is 500. And I'm like, this was like in a couple of weeks. And I think before it crested, it was over 1,000. Our one of our co-op borders us to the south, Trinity Valley. I think they had 3,000 or 4,000 on their Againer page, Facebook page. So we learned about Twitter and Facebook, and we got emails and phone calls. I mean, we were just getting lit up, and they were throwing everything at us they could as to why this was our fault. We were bad co-op, and we don't have their best interests at heart. So most of the complaints were obviously were high bills. And you can see, and just some examples here. Here was a electronic complaint that came in. I'm incredibly frustrated and angry that I've got another $400+ bill. Again, this was our bill is the highest we have ever seen it. And then those were contact us off of our website. I think, isn't that right, Jim? Those first couple, and we didn't see a lot of stuff on Twitter, but we did see a lot of it on Facebook. Some of the comments were X-rated, and Jim would post something trying to get the word out, and boy, they would just latch on to our post and then just trash those. So that was the way they were getting to us. And so again, here's an example of scholarship, talking about our scholarship program, and this is why my bill is so flipping high, was a comment at the bottom of the social media post on scholarships. So the Fight FEC Facebook page was created. We were pretty sure that some of our members or people that were getting on these pages were Stream and Ambit representatives of multi-level marketing group for REPs, retail electric providers here in Texas. So they weren't doing us any favors. So they just seized the opportunity to trash the co-op, and try to sell a little electricity. Of course, they couldn't sell to our members, but that didn't seem to bother them. Again, this was some of the social media posts from the Ambit representative. Called us liars and cheaters. This was a post that Jim did. You can't see it very well, but it's a listing of our Operation Roundup charities that we had donated funds to from Operation Roundup. And down at the bottom, this is somebody said, these are just random charities to make themselves look good. This is why our bill's so high. First, I think everybody here knows that Operation Roundup is those are separate funds. They're voluntary. And we put everybody on. We were an opt-in, or an opt-out version co-op. So everybody we put everybody on when we started, but we have a no questions asked opt-out, and we'll give you all your money back. And so we did during this time. We gave quite a few people their funds back, but we're over 90% today. Again, I'll go on. So we're getting all these social media, complaints. We've got hundreds of people, mad at us, wanting to rip us limb from limb. And so I did what, any good general manager would do. I just decided, well, we're going to educate members. And the best way I know how to do, since I'm an educated individual, I'm going to write a memo. And so I drafted this 5-page memo, and I can't tell you how proud I was of this memo. And we went over every complaint in detail that people were chirping about. Our usage is high. We had installed RF meters. We had finished a rollout a year or so prior. People were saying, well, that new meter, it spins faster. That's why my bill's high. Or, these digital meters, so I had drafted up this memo, and then I'd about ready to send it to every member. And Jim and I were talking, and I said, we need to get some help. I said, I don't know about this. We need to get some help. And I said, I ran across this guy at the TEC managers meeting in December, Jared Bro. To call him and see what he thinks, see if he can help us. And so that's when we got Jared in the mix. And first day, I just finished this memo and I sent it to Jared. I'm so proud of it. And Jared said, well, Mark, that's a nice memo, but let me give you an alternative. He was snickering, I think. And so we trashed the memo. I still have it. If anybody wants it, I'll be glad to send it to you. It's pretty good. Really, it's good. So we hired Jared, and he helped us to take a different approach. And I'll just give you this book called Brief. I hadn't read it. It was on my shelf, but I haven't read it. But it is really, I need to read it. It's probably pretty good. But one thing it says is this whole thing in a nutshell: most day-to-day communications are unfocused and unclear. That's an inexcusable waste of everybody's time and resources. Brief isn't a nicety; it's a necessity. And I think in terms of Hillary Clinton trying to run a campaign against Donald Trump. Now, if Hillary comes out with her notebooks full of policy statements, and Trump, he's got 40 characters on his Twitter feed. I mean, it's just an unfair fight, and it's the same thing that we're talking about here today. It's just keep it simple, keep it brief. So we hired Jared, and we changed our outlook completely about how we deal with our members. We relaxed our budget billing criteria. We used to have a pretty strong. You had to have good credit to get on our budget billing. I said, the heck with that. The people that need budget billing or average billing the most are the people that are having trouble pay these bills. So we relaxed or eliminated any obstacle to getting on our average billing plan. And we call this our 3-point plan. There were a couple of different iterations as we went through this thing on our 3-point plan, but one of them was budget billing, audits, and payment assistance, and the second one was budget billing, audits, and rebates. But the budget billing and the audits have been a key piece of our 3-point plan for 6 years, and we didn't just talk about this once. We're still talking about it. We're still hammering home the 3-point plan. No 5-page memos. We're talking about, budget billing and audits and some sort of rebates or payment assistance. So we worked with the members to develop payment arrangements. We have the Operation Roundup monies, and we use those through local organizations and directly through our member service agents to help members with high bills. We found out where the complaints were coming from, and what we found were there were areas with high poverty rates. There were a lot of renters, a lot of mobile homes. They were heating with electricity and not gas. Kind of in a central part of our service territory. In a more populated suburban part of our territory in the west, a lot of those homes heat with gas. But in the central area that was the high poverty area with a lot of mobile homes, they were, drafty structures in a lot of cases, heating with electricity. And those are the ones who had the really high bills and they were really having trouble. And those are the ones that really lit us up on social media. We ended up plotting all these on a map, and we ended up calling them. If we could find a name, an address on social media, we could match it up with a membership. We had member service representatives calling and talking with these members. So And Jim notes here that, the members were much nicer, in person than they were on social media. And we really did try to help them. We got them into budget billing. Um, and again, we offered to, if you've got a high bill, let us come out and look at your house. Let's look at your structure. And you all know how that goes. They might be running an extension cord to a chicken coop, in the back, or they may, probably heating with a toaster. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to drive up, electric bills. And then Jim did a really good job of using social media to our advantage, and still does today. It's a big part of our communications. We learned how to boost posts and all kinds of stuff. We have 2 people dedicated now, to communications, and it has made a difference. And one of the things that we've highlighted or keyed on in our communications program over the last 6 years is this idea of a temperature gap. And everybody knows if you've set your thermostat on 70 and it's 65 degrees outside, your system doesn't have to work very hard. If it's heating, if your system doesn't have to work very hard to get from, to get 5 degrees. But if it's 25 degrees outside, that system's got to work awful hard. And the gap between, 70 degrees, you've got your thermostat on, and 25 degrees outside. I mean, you're going to end up with a lot of usage. And today is a great example. The heaters are going to run nonstop for the next week. Going to generate some really high usage. Again, this was one of the posts they did on Facebook about energy efficiency rebates. This was a summer post. Get your air conditioner tuned up. We'll pay $50 towards that. Lighting rebate, energy efficient lighting rebates, and you can see how many people are reached down here. We get a lot of likes on these posts. Again, here's another home energy audit post that we did. The other thing that we did, and it's been an important part, we tightened up our message. We centered around the 3-point plan. We also hired an advertising agency to help us make things look good and consistent. And so this is our current, this is part of our current color scheme. We use Cooperatives in Tyler, Texas. There's lots of ad agents out there, but they've done a good job for us. This was a budget billing piece. I think this was a bill insert. This is kind of the last 2 slides I've got. The other thing that we've done, our magazine is used extensively. We use bill stuffers. We do social media. But we also do a summer and a winter mailer. And there's a recurring theme in those summer and winter mailers. And Jim is strategic about when he sends those out. I think he sends the winter mailer out in December, November, December, before the January, February, high bills. And then the summer mailer will typically go out, in June, I think. Before obviously we get some high heat in August. And so this is a front page of one of the mailers, and you can see here that we're highlighting the 3-point plan again. And this is our full color scheme that we use consistently on our website, on all our communications messaging. So we got budget billing, free energy audit, and then we're looking out for you. And in this case, the third plank is energy saving ideas, local assistance organizations. You got a short note here from the general manager. And again, we're talking about this temperature gap, and degrees and savings. So that's all I've got. It's just a consistent message that we've been hammering for 6 years, and we're fast growing system. Almost half of our members were not members 6 years ago. I know in the last 40% of our members that are members today joined in the last 5 years. And so they weren't around 6 years ago when we, first dealt with this sort of crisis. And so we have continued to hammer away at the same themes. And so hopefully, they sort of get it a little better than, we just assumed that everybody would in 2016. It's just, you just got to say it again, and keep it simple. So that's our story. We I think managed to get through it. We don't have a lot of unrest. I'm not saying, it could happen. I mean, it could happen. It did happen, and I'll never forget it. And I don't think anybody wants to deal with that kind of unrest, because it was awful uneasy, and it was difficult because, we all sit around and we think we do a pretty good job, and we, work on our members' behalf, and, we're a cooperative program and all that stuff. We've got these principles, and somebody comes up and says, you stink. And it's unsettling, but anyway, there's an approach, there's a way to deal with it. And it took a lot of effort, and a lot of credit goes to Jim and his efforts and team, and Jared was right there with us and helped get us through
it. So let's look a little bit at some of the root cause analysis that we did. So at the beginning of the masterclass, I showed you the 5 steps to effective crisis communications. And in Mark's case, what we had to do first was a vulnerability assessment of this particular event, so that we could then do our crisis communications plan process, which is gather information, confirm information, and disseminate information. And then what that messaging is and how to write that messaging and get it ready. And there are 2 types of crises in the world. There's a sudden crisis, which is the lightning bolt that you weren't expecting. And then there are smoldering crises. And this one was a smoldering crisis, but the fire was getting hot really fast. And whenever you have an opposition group like this, you kind of have to go through this moral, ethical quagmire of, do I join the group? Do I join as me, or do I make a fake Facebook page? And in our case, some of the employees had actually joined the group so they could spy in the group. So that gave us access to see who all the members were. So as we did our vulnerability assessment, one of the things we did was a root cause analysis of, why are these people so mad? Who are these people? And, I sat there, we were in the conference room, and I said, well, we've got all their names. Do you have all their names in the computer somewhere? And we literally went through and matched up names as best as we can, knowing that some of the people on Facebook were not listed as the member because they were a spouse of the member whose name was on the billing for the membership. However, we were able, for the most part, to work it out, because people on Facebook will list who their spouse is and who their siblings are and things like that, who their kids are. So I think we were able to come down with, like 100 to 300 people that we were able to identify. And then once we identified them, what we found out was they are the chronic late payers. They are the individuals who consistently go to roundup organizations. They are the ones that we were able to identify. If there are 20 roundup organizations, they will work one a month so that their bill is always paid. And so what we quickly realized in an empathetic way is the people who were complaining the loudest were hurting the most, because it was the nature of who they were in their state of poverty or existence, or whatever their economic reality was, for whatever reasons it was. And that's when we came up with the idea of, what's the fastest way to get in touch with these people? hey, member services has everybody's phone number. And we put member services on the phone. But first, we had to come up with, as Mark talked about, the 3-point plan. So I'll give you some insight that when you're responding to a crisis and you have to come up with a plan, you will either come up with a 3-point, 5-point, 7-point, or 12-point plan. Don't ask me why. That's just my secret sauce. 3-point, 5-point, 7-point, or 12-point plan. Yours was simple enough that it was a 3-point plan, and 3-point plans are my favorite plans. I have had some companies that are in really bad shape, and we've had to do the 12-point, and that's not easy to communicate. But what we also did was say, okay, how much extra roundup money do we have sitting in the kitty, and will the board cut it loose so that we can give these people a little roundup boost? That was strategy number one. Strategy number two was, what if we get these people on levelized billing? What if we can call them and say, okay, your $700 bill, we're gonna put you in levelized billing, and that's gonna bring that $700 bill down to a $250 bill. And this month only, we're gonna give you $100 of roundup money. Is that enough incentive for you to go on levelized billing? Because if they're on levelized billing, they're never gonna have the outrageous rate again, and therefore they won't complain in the future. So what we're trying to do is manage expectations, whether they knew it or not, and manage behavior by managing frustration, by eliminating frustration. So in crisis management and in crisis communications, one of your goals is to make the crisis go away. That's one of the things I've talked about in some of the other master classes before. That is the most insane thing about this whole COVID thing that we're in, is half the people want to let the house burn down while the other half of the people want to put water in the house. In this case, we were able to find a crisis where everybody was on board, that if we could offer them these options. So the board agreed, round up money. And the other thing on the levelized billing is Mark was sharp enough to realize, well, there's a level up in December, right about the time they want to buy Christmas presents, there's going to be a bump. So we found a mechanism to make the levelized billing true up a little at a time instead of a big true up at the end of the year, which was at Christmas time when they needed that money for presents. And then Mark and his team and Jim and his team got with member services and started making outbound phone calls. And that just freaked the daylights out of everybody because they weren't expecting a call. And as Jim mentioned before this, when we were all chatting, people are nicer to you when you phone them. The written word can be cold. The spoken word has emotion. That's why a phone call is a more effective way to reach someone than an email. And we were, at the same time that these phone calls were going out, we were on their Facebook group monitoring what they were saying. And they were saying, is anybody else getting a phone call? And, what are they doing? And I took the money and I'm doing the levelized billing. So with that setup of where it went, Mark, tell us a little bit more about the reactions you were getting and how the tides began to turn once we started those outbound phone calls and the outbound messaging with their 3-point plan.
Well, Jim may be better able to answer that question, but it crested pretty quick. Once we started our messaging and communication, we got that bill behind us. The next month was a lot milder. It was a 2 to 4 week, really the worst. And like I say, when that next bill came out, it was a lot better. And we had started contacting people. We figured out where they are. We started contacting them. We started giving them money, roundup money if they needed it. It made a definite impact. The other thing I did, you gotta have a real supportive board to do this. We essentially froze our wholesale power cost / PCRF, and we didn't change it for 3 or 4 years, and we got pretty under collected. I had to sweat some because we thought we were going to get lower wholesale power costs. We kept getting good projections that didn't materialize, and so But that was one thing that we hadn't really touched on, but we essentially froze it. There's no way I was going to increase the PCRF if I could avoid it, because that to me, that was just going to trigger the thing all over again. So we left PCRF static, and we stayed substantially over collected for the next 5 years, and finally got down, and now I'm sitting on $11 million over collection now. So we're fixing to have a opposite happen. We're going to have these big usage winter bills, but we're going to nip them in the bud by giving back $3 or $4 million on our PCRF, and hopefully get that under control by this summer. But it just didn't take about as fast as it blew up. It seemed to settle back down, and with the efforts that we did.
So one of the things everybody should note is that usually when you have a group like this, and I know some of you on this call have groups or you fear having a group like this, usually it's only one or two really angry people. And they're often just angry complainers by nature. It tends to be their DNA, but their DNA also makes them the type of people who can motivate other people around them. And when that happens, you see what happens. Now, Mark, you actually, through all the outreaches, found that this person has left, but the person who now runs that Facebook group has now become almost an ambassador for you because you have a personal one-on-one relationship with them. Talk a little bit about the value of building relationships with people who otherwise could be your mortal enemies.
Well, I mean that's the old-fashioned co-op member service, personal touch. Jerry Williams is really good at that. Just talking down home with people, and it's just, that's what we've always done, and that's how we would like to do things. Again, we had reached out, and the lady who runs it now, they were new members, and they got involved in we won't member or customer choice. We won't be able to choose our provider thing, and they listened to our messaging about doing your the weather stripping and insulation and all that sort of stuff. Well, they did the things that we told them. They had an energy audit. They did the things the auditor recommended. They cut their bill in half, and they're like, oh, they sort of got it. And so the first administrator left. The second one, took over and realized that we weren't the bad guys. And we really were trying to help. And they became an ambassador for us. And let me tell you, they're very involved in their community. And if they need a contribution for their latest, the fire department or the, whatever their chamber of commerce, we find a way to help them. And I've gone down there and distributed caps, and you'd have thought I was passing out $100 bills. So, it just takes a little effort, but they're really good people. I mean, they're really nice. They just got caught up in this thing. They were new. They didn't know what a co-op was. And, what was, going on Facebook sounded reasonable until they figured out it wasn't.
So for all of you who, or some of you see your membership change more than others. So those of you closest to large metropolitan area are going to see that change happen. And that's really what's happening to Mark, because he's on those Dallas suburbs where the cotton fields are now becoming neighborhoods. And the warning I'll give to all of you is the new homes are usually purchased by people in their 20s and 30s who are having their first round of children, and it's usually their first or second home, and they're more socially media savvy than the average person that you're going to run across. And because they're socially savvy, you're also going to see the situation where there's usually an influencer in the neighborhood. We affectionately refer to that as Nosy Rosie syndrome. My daughter just moved into a new neighborhood, first build in a little town in North Carolina. And I was visiting her and she was talking about, yeah, Dad, that lady out there, that's our Nosy Rosie. And she is the unifier and the troublemaker. Pardon my French, we down here in Louisiana refer to that as a shit stirrer. And so you've got to watch out for these people as the new neighborhoods develop, that the socially savvy younger folks in their 20s and 30s are going to be the ones who have the ability to either light the fire or to be your best ambassador. So as your area grows, you've got to do what Mark's doing, which is year in and year out, keep on the very same campaign that we started 6 years ago. Manage expectations and communicate the 3-point plan. And all of you have energy audits. Most of you have Roundup, and most of you have levelized billing. So you've got the 3 tools. I'll say them again. You got levelized billing, you've got energy audits, and you've got Operation Roundup funds. So that is, I think, just a huge takeaway. And if you're not using those, you need to start using them to your advantage because it makes all the difference in the world. Social media. Those of you who've been on the prior calls know that I have a love-hate relationship with social media. At the time, 6 years ago, we made that part of the strategy because that is where the chatter was happening. I just got finished writing a 3-page document that I'm going to be sharing with those of you who have my other plans. I just wrote it yesterday about social media. So let me share the concepts with all of you right now, and then we'll talk about Jim's use of social media. Jim, so stand by. We're going to unmute you in a second. 6 years ago, the algorithms for Facebook were different than they are now. Algorithms on Facebook are not to your advantage if something bad is going down. And they're not to your advantage if something good is going down. Algorithms in social media are built to sell advertising. So the more eyeballs that pass an ad for something, the more money Facebook hypothetically will take Facebook. The more money Facebook can charge the users because of, quote, more eyeballs or more impressions. The way the algorithms are currently built is you can post something, and if no one interacts with it, it dies on the vine. They quit showing it in everyone's newsfeed. You've all had this situation to where you've got 500 friends, but you only hear from the same 10 over and over again. That's because they click a like on you, you comment on them, and it creates these little pod friends. And Facebook likes pods, and they like groups. So an active group gets more eyeballs. That being said, if you have a crisis that is ugly, that you don't want to publicize, some people put it on Facebook to be, quote, air quotes here, transparent. Putting it on your own website, in your own newsroom, on your own blog site is being transparent. If you've got ugly news to share, train your members to go to your website for official information. Train them to go to the outage center. Train them, and as much as possible, get them off Facebook. Because if something ugly is posted on Facebook, every time one person clicks like, hypothetically, 10 of their friends see it. If they make a comment, hypothetically, 20 of their friends get to see it. If they share, hypothetically, 50 of their friends get to see it. And the more friends who like, comment, and share, the more eyeballs it sends, because it's a small trend that allows Facebook to charge more money. So if you use social media, proceed with caution. I am a fan of tried and true, which is a well-written statement over on that website. That statement Mark originally wrote is a great statement. There is a place for it on the website where you can bring people over to it. If you use Facebook, put links on Facebook that link back to your website, you own the website. You control the algorithms on your website. You only rent free space over on Facebook. Facebook is abusing you. And if you have not seen the Netflix series, The Social Dilemma, everybody get your pen out and write Social Dilemma. That is your weekend assignment, if you still have power, to watch The Social Dilemma. It will scare you to death. With that being said, let's bring Jim in. Jim, why don't you talk just briefly? We've got 15 minutes here. Why don't you just share with us some of your observations and memories of that time and what you've been doing since then to try to keep folks happy and informed and active in that 3-point plan. And Jim, you will need to unmute yourself.
Well, I'm pretty much going to parrot what Mark said. We've had a tremendous amount of growth since this time that I don't particularly like to speak about because I still have a lot, still makes me anxious. One of the things that we've really tried to do is when I guess last year, Mark, we had over 6,000 net new members. That's probably the second or third straight year for that. And so even though that we internally are kind of maybe tired of hearing about the 3-point plan, like Mark said, our members, it may be the first time they've heard it. And so really getting ahead and then hammering it home at every opportunity, whether it be traditional media, social media, whatever kind of works for that demographic. We try to get it out in front of them, kind of ahead of the clutter, if you will. And then the one thing that you mentioned about the direct phone calls, I think previously we only thought of ourselves as taking inbound calls to the call center. So really that concept of making outbound calls and trying to be proactive, like you hit the nail on the head, Jared. That really made our members kind of stand up and kind of, I think, separated us. That we're trying to do something different, and it was pretty well received. Our staff at that time was not necessarily sales oriented, and they kind of had to become sales oriented to try to convince folks, but kind of dangling that operation money out there helped. And I think we went from probably less than 200 people on our average billing or budget billing that we call it to it peaked at over 1,500 members shortly after in the February-March 2015 time period. So really eliminating that sticker shock, or as Mark said, the when that high winter bill comes, that really goes a long way to keeping people off social media. So as this has gone along, one of the things that we've started to notice as we continue to monitor social media is people are now starting to parrot our terminology, the things that we put out there. So if someone, even other than the administrator of that fight group, if someone does complain, hey, have you called them? Have you received a home energy audit? Have you enrolled in budget billing? They're coming back with our 3-point plan basically, and that's just great from my perspective. But that doesn't happen if you just kind of let the opportunity pass by. You just have to keep hammering it home every chance you get.
Yeah. So one of the things I want to key on that you said was that you're tired of the 3-point plan and saying it, but you realize that your audience isn't, or they haven't heard it for the first time. So I want all of you to remember, just because you're tired of it doesn't mean they've heard it for the first time. The second thing is the power of repetition. The fact that members are now parroting what they have heard and seen and read because it's been put out there so many times is super, super powerful. I want to mention to you that there's a chat button on the bottom of your Zoom window. If you want to ask a question, just type your name and say, I have a question, and I will call on you. We've got 10 minutes left, and we'll let you guys ask Mark and Jim some questions. And a couple of people have asked Mark if they can see your brochures and stuff, and it is all on their website. So just go to the farmer's website. It's a good looking website. Tom Ruth over at Western has the first question. Tom, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Mark and Jim, I really appreciate everything that you've shared there. I think all of us can relate to that and getting caught. Let's go back to the beginning whenever you said this first started, that, you're in a competitive environment down there in Texas, and, you might have had some outside influence from non-members that maybe helped start this. So you talked about being able to identify those on Facebook and others, that perhaps were your members in your database. What did you discover about the number of people from outside of your organization that might have helped get this started?
Well, I think it's their motivation. As I mentioned, and with Jim putting that in those slides, we had some folks with Ambit and Stream, which are multi-level marketing REPs, retail electric providers. And, some of them, we had some people that were just chirping and complaining about their bills, and they weren't our members. I mean, we did find some of that. I thought that was pretty interesting. And I wanted to say, hey, wait a minute. It's not our bill. Call Jerry Williams, call somebody else who so it was just interesting. I mean, it just took on a life of its own, and there wasn't much reason going on. And now, of course, I understand it a lot better now. I mean, I literally thought, I've been working all these years trying to help members and, do, good things and observe the cooperatives, the 7 principles, but these people just don't appreciate it. They hurt my feelings. That's what I'm telling you. It just hurt my feelings. And anyway,
Mark, let's mention for people who aren't aware of that landscape in Texas, the retail power supply is you don't have to be a power company to sell someone electricity to their meter. It is a whole different world. We all know that Texas is a country unto itself, and that was one of the things that was happening there. And you, as an individual, could literally join a multi-level marketing group that would resell power to people. And so but you couldn't do it with the co-ops. Co-ops were not part of that. It was just Entergy and some of the other investor-owned companies that had that happening. So that was a whole different landscape for you, Mark.
It was. And it's not all of Texas. But it's the biggest part. The Dallas, Fort Worth Metroplex, Houston, Galveston, big area, and then down in Corpus Christi, down in South Texas, where AEP, American Electric Power, is. It's the what we call it's ERCOT, Electric Reliability Council, Texas area, which is most of it. But if you get in Deep East Texas or Far West Texas, you're in you're out of ERCOT, and so you're not in a retail choice area. But all the major metropolitan areas are, and so we've got millions of Texans which are have a choice. They don't have a choice on the wires, who provides the power, but they have a choice of who provides the energy. And it's just kind of a crazy patchwork deal here. And we have to explain from time to time why we don't offer, because we have a lot of members that move, from some of the cities we're duly certified, where us and Encore can serve, and they have a choice when they're on Encore. They come to Farmers, they don't have a choice, and they're like, why don't I have a choice? And so we have to explain, why they don't have a choice, and some of them don't like it, but for the most part, it works out. It's just, we're another thing we have to communicate.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, a couple of things for you all to take away from this. Keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, read, really monitor what's out there and get ahead of it as fast as possible. Even I learned from every one of these situations that I've been through. And for those of you who are on one of the earlier master classes where we were talking about have a library of pre-written news releases, after working with Mark, I actually came back to my office and I wrote out, I think I have 6 or 8 different types of pre-written news releases for events that could blow up on social media. And then when we launched Situation Hub last year, we made sure there were like 6 or 8 of those same crises built into Situation Hub so that you open that tab, answer the questions, and boom, in 3 minutes, you got a news release ready to go. So put this in your vulnerability assessment. Think back to the whole process of this is one more vulnerability discussion you should have. If you haven't already discussed it. And then not only is the high bill this time of year something that should be in your vulnerability discussion, but everything else that's crazy and wackadoodle on Facebook or on social media or whatever needs to be discussed. So think in terms of those and then build those pre-written statements in case you ever have to communicate on that. I'm going to share my screen with you so that you all have a link. I always give everybody a chance to do a free call with me. If you need help with vulnerability assessments, with crisis communications plans, with training, any of that type of stuff, or if you want to see how the Situation Hub works, use the link that you see there on the screen and you can schedule a call with me over the next couple of days. And because you're on this call, I will give you the $299 version of Situation Hub for $99 a month if you are interested in that. I hope you all do well through this winter weather. By all means, start communicating in advance, manage the expectations of your audience, communicate excessively before, during, and after, and build mechanisms to get directly to the members. Don't rely just on social media. I hope you all make it through the storm. Next month, we'll be back with another masterclass, so keep your eyes open for the next email with the next topic. Be well. I'm Jared Bro. Thanks for your time this afternoon on today's masterclass. We'll see you guys later.
Thank you, Jared.